For anyone feeling lost in life, especially in your 20s, you've probably asked yourself this question at some point. What am I doing with my life? You're not alone. Just over a year ago, I was asking myself that same question. And when I look back at that time and all of the positive change I've made in my life since then, I realize that question changed my life. And it can change yours too. Because after all, sometimes you need to get lost to be found. In this video, I want to talk about a few things. The first being when we typically start to feel lost in life. From there, why we feel lost and why it's so common in our 20s. And then lastly, the most important part, how do we actually take this feeling and use it to our advantage and find our own path moving forward in life. We typically feel lost in life when we've been going down a path and all of a sudden it diverges. And at that point, we're sort of left with two options. We can either keep going down, continuing the same path we've been on, the only one we've really known up until that point, or we can potentially explore our curiosity and go down the other one. But in that situation, the thought of making such a huge decision can be daunting. You're sort of just stuck there, contemplating all these hypothetical scenarios and questioning anything and everything, right? Asking questions like, what am I doing with my life? We typically come across this sort of inflection point when we're faced with difficult or challenging circumstances, changes, or transitions in life. So for those of you watching who may have just recently graduated and started working, fortunately or unfortunately, you've got to deal with all three. And that was exactly the case for me last year. I had just graduated and left behind the bubble that is college. I was trying to figure out how to transition from this identity of being a student, a kid, to all of a sudden being a working adult with real responsibilities. And I guess the cherry on top was that I was working a pretty demanding, soul-sucking job. As all of these different areas sort of weighed in on me all at once, I couldn't help but ask questions like, what am I doing with my life? Why am I doing any of this? Looking back now, a year later, it makes total sense why my world came crashing down and why many of us, perhaps even yourself, feel lost in life. This is a pretty timely example. The other day, I was meeting a new coworker for the first time, and I asked him, could you tell me about yourself? And for the next few minutes, he talked about how long he's been with the company, what he does in his role. And I had to sit through all of this before I could say, that's great and all, but could you tell me about who you really are? And that's the thing, right? Our upbringing and how society works conditions us to believe that our identity is more about what we do rather than who we are. I think about life and all of this sort of like we're building a house, right? We're so focused on doing things, like getting good grades and doing extracurriculars so we can get into those good schools and get those great internships so we can get a high-paying job, make a bunch of money, and sail off into the sunset, right? But the thing is, when we're so focused on doing all of those things, we're really just focusing on what's above the surface. When we do that, we forget to work on building what's below the surface, right? And it may not be the most sexy, glamorous stuff you see get posted on social media, but it's the most important part, your foundation, knowing who you are and what makes you uniquely you, knowing answers to questions like, what truly matters to me in life? What are my hopes and dreams. When we live our lives so focused on building what's above the surface, I mean, you see how it plays out, right? People spend years, decades building and filling out their homes, and when problems start to appear seemingly out of nowhere, only then do they realize that they built their house on a shaky foundation. Problems like the job that just sort of sucks, the relationship that doesn't feel quite right, a feeling of life is just off. But by then, you've already got way more at stake, right? Fancy appliances, nice curtains, maybe even a family. And that just adds to the pressure you're already facing. But the thing is, these problems don't appear seemingly out of nowhere. They all start somewhere, but they start small enough, so small that we may not notice them, or rather, we can choose to ignore them. And it's easy to do all of this because I don't know about you, but all I heard throughout my life, especially in college, was stuff like working and adulting sucks. No relationship is perfect, which I'll get to. All you hear is these sort of answers when these problems inevitably show up in your life. You're not really surprised because you were sort of expecting them. But far too often, and far too many of us, we just take other people's answers as our own. We stop at the surface level. We don't try to come up with our own answers to go below the surface and really try and understand where these problems are coming from, right? Asking questions like, why does my job suck? What about it sucks? Why does my relationship feel unhealthy? What am I doing with my life? But for as daunting as those questions may be, especially when you first come across them at that divergence in your path, it may be scary, but you have an opportunity in front of you. And whether you realize it or not, you're right where you're meant to be. As Henry David Thoreau said, not until we are lost do we begin to find ourselves. If you're feeling lost or something just sort of feels off in life, as difficult or uncomfortable as it may be, and I know this is easier said than done, but try and embrace the feeling, because that feeling is an opportunity for you to start going below the surface. The more you think about and start coming up with your own answers to the deeper questions in life, the more you'll really build your foundation. The more you'll understand yourself for who you actually are and all of the areas of life that actually matter. The more equipped you'll be to navigate any sort of potential challenges or problems life throws at you. The more equipped you'll be to build your home, to create and live a beautiful life. And as lonely as it may be at times, especially when you're at that inflection point in your path, you're not alone. I believe in you, and myself and so many others in the world are right here with you.